This so-called reproductive health care reform bill in New South Wales is certainly a contradiction in terms. It seems to be about anything but reproduction. I mentioned the other day that I don't know Louise Roberts. She wrote an outstanding piece last week in Sydney's Daily Telegraph in which she said, amongst other things, and I quote, "Humanity has taken an unpalatable turn of late, with our collective consciousness in Australia seeming to focus increasingly on one thing, ending human life and pushing through laws that enable us to do so more efficiently. Birth control and death control, these are our new mantras." And in the bewildering swirl of this week's debate on abortion, she wrote, "How would I explain to my kids this downward trend for supporting death, not life?" And she made the point, we've got a terrible suicide epidemic in this country, and yet we have lawmakers saying it's acceptable to kill yourself. Why shouldn't a doctor give you a hand? Euthanasia and abortion. There can be no argument about moving abortion from the Crimes Act to the Health Act. That's just common sense. But under this legislation, doctors are permitted to perform a termination on a woman who is more than 22 weeks pregnant, 5.5 months, if they've consulted with a second doctor and both doctors agree termination should take place. This is not straightforward. And as I've made the point many times, the role of a leader is to take with him or her those they choose to lead. It's not leading when you walk over people. The views of many people on this issue have not been heard, let alone answered. There are two groups who are alienated. The Liberal Party in New South Wales, whoever is running it, have alienated their own people. 19 Liberals voted against this abortion bill. Only 14 voted for it. The Liberal Party supporters, government supporters, believe they've been treated with contempt. The bill, after all, was proposed not by the government of the day, but by an independent who got 17,000 votes at the last election. Many are asking, was some deal done before the election? The Premier, Gladys Berejiklian, assures me that was not the case, so I'm taking her at her word on this. But we're now in a situation where New South Wales have abortion laws and Victoria have euthanasia laws, and it seems as though those making the laws are more intent on helping us end life than preserving it. Notwithstanding the fact that there is a case for reform of both abortion and the euthanasia laws. The other group that's been alienated are the people who went to an election, voted for a government in New South Wales thinking something would be done about drought, something would be done about electricity prices, something would be done about a coal-fired power station, something would be done about the collapsing educational standards in our classrooms, something would be done about immigration. They can't believe that their issues have been kicked down the road and suddenly this abortion bill has been elevated to the top of the queue. Why was it given a rails run? Does the Anglican Archbishop of Sydney deserve to have his concerns addressed? When he said simply, and I quote, "I can't believe for the life of me that these respected parliamentarians would ever put their name to a bill which would kill an unborn baby the day before birth." Well, quiet Australians are angry. There are people, for example, from Asian and ethnic backgrounds with a firm belief in traditional family values who are agog at what they see as a betrayal and the weakness of the leadership in articulating an appropriate response. It's important in these things to look at a bit of history. Abortion has been rightly decriminalised in the Northern Territory, but the Northern Territory bans late-term abortions after 23 weeks, except to save a woman's life. So statistics there aren't valid. Queensland is used to cite numbers where late-term abortions are rare, but they only allowed abortion until birth for any reason last year, so we don't have statistics. The New South Wales proponents say this bill will decrease late-term abortions. Well, the only state where there is any track record here is Victoria. Abortion was decriminalised in 2008 in Victoria and allowed until birth for a range of reasons. What do we learn? Since abortion was decriminalised in Victoria, late-term abortions have increased by 39%. Abortions for psychosocial reasons have increased by 32%. Between 2009 and 2016, 1,277 babies were aborted for reasons other than the physical health of the mother or the baby. In 2011, one of the babies aborted for psychosocial reasons was 37 weeks. Now, what I'm about to say is staggering, but nonetheless, it has to be said. One of the more horrifying realities of late-term abortion is that many babies are born alive following a termination, with the deliberate intention that they die with no life-saving measures implemented. I understand from a piece that I read recently that in Victoria, between 2008 and 2016, there have been 336 babies who were born alive during an abortion and died after delivery. There apparently is no data as to how long they lived or whether the babies may have lived if brought to term. According to a very researched piece written recently by Debbie Garrett, the Executive Director of Real Choices Australia, an educator and a researcher on abortion discourse, who argued the bill's proponents argue it will make it harder to get a late-term abortion because it requires 2 doctors to approve abortions after 22 weeks. This could be true if there were only a limited number of permissible reasons for approving a late-term abortion. Close scrutiny of how doctors make this approval and punitive sanctions for breach. However, she says, this is not what's being proposed in New South Wales. She writes, the second doctor doesn't have to even see the patient or look at her file. The second doctor doesn't have to be independent. She writes, even more telling, there's no legal penalty if the 2-doctor rule is not observed. A law without a penalty, she says, is no law at all. This bill allows late-term abortion for virtually any reason. It allows abortions up to birth for physical, psychological and social reasons, which in effect encompasses everything, for there is no reason outside those 3 categories. Social reasons would include relationship breakdown, financial challenges or even sex selection. Before 22 weeks, abortion is on demand. It can be made for any reason. All this highlights the fact that this legislation has been put together in haste and people with important contributions to make have been excluded from the process. This shouldn't have been the province of secret, almost clandestine meetings amongst parliamentarians, excluding the wider voting public. Tanya Davies is a former Minister for Women in New South Wales, a Liberal. She moved a motion in relation to this legislation to require, quote, termination not be used for gender selection. The motion was defeated. So if that is what you're against, what are you for? If Tanya Davies wanted termination not to be used for gender selection and the motion was defeated, presumably there are some who believe that termination can be used for gender selection. This is a mess. The public feel a sense of betrayal and the recently elected government of New South Wales is in big trouble. Only today I was sent 2 simple sentences. I quote, if a man kills a baby the day it is born, he can be charged with murder and if found guilty, can be sentenced to 20 years in jail. If this bill is passed, then a doctor will be able to kill that same baby before it's scheduled to be born, and that will be legal. Does this bill define at law when a fetus becomes a baby? It doesn't. Peter and I have asked Tanya Davies to join us here, a Liberal member of the Government of New South Wales and formerly a Minister for Women. Thank you for your time, Tanya.
Alan. Thanks, Peter.
You've done it tough. Can I just ask you one question up front in the light of everything I've said there? Have you had death threats as a result of the stand you've taken?
Yes, I have. Yep.
Do you feel at risk?
I've alerted the police. The police minister also knows. They're investigating that particular message that was left on my office. But I feel extremely passionate and very, very concerned about the bill that's before the New South Wales people. The New South Wales Parliament is the representative of the people. So this bill is before the people. What I am incredibly aggrieved about is the process whereby our government has essentially trashed and thrown out the window due process for not only the Parliament to consider this bill and the consequences and the details, but to actually take it out of the hands of the people to have a say. And that is simply undemocratic. And that is what I'm fighting against now, and me with a number of small colleagues in the Parliament, in the Liberal Party. We are calling on the Premier to bring in due process for this piece of legislation. It is
just to interrupt you, see, there are people, there's pictures, Peter, of the Parliament. They're all shouting and congratulating and cheering.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, it's just an ugly look.
I don't understand. I mean, Alan and I, you obviously, have been in and around parliamentary process for a long time. There hasn't been prosecutions in New South Wales but for 2 cases in 40 years. So I don't understand the reason for the rush, the haste. It seems to me the haste is because less people know about the laws and as they are now, talk about them and not be happy with them. Why was this attempted to be pushed through? There was, obviously in the first little while, it was going to be pushed through in a matter of days, Now at least there's a bit more scrutiny, but nowhere near enough time for something as huge as this.
Look, abortion is a very complex, highly sensitive and emotive subject, and it is one whereby we expect our leaders to actually take the community through the process in a very gentle and a very methodical and careful way. That has not happened. I implored the Premier when we heard about this, 2 days after it was made public, that this was going to be introduced to the Parliament. I implored the Premier to bring due process, allow our communities time to consider the detail and have their say. I mean, the fact that even on the Thursday we debated for 12 hours and I put many amendments up, even proponents of the bill were madly handwriting amendments to the bill on the floor of the Parliament. I mean, that is
12 hours is nothing.
terrible.
A native title bill is 70 hours.
Exactly.
I know bills in the Commonwealth Parliament that are over 100 hours and nowhere near as.
But I'd make, for
significant
the benefit of our viewers, I'd make a further point. I can guarantee you, London to a brick on, as they say, there wouldn't be 20 people in the Parliament that read the bill. Eh?
Well, you're probably right. I have read the bill, and I've reread it after we moved amendments. But the fact of the matter is that there are significant flaws that still remain in this bill. There are incredible questions that have not been answered, and we need to get to the bottom of those questions, and we need to do it with all of our community on board. The feeling in my electorate in Western Sydney, an area that the Liberals must win if we are to retain government, the feeling out there is white hot with anger. I actually feel I've betrayed my own community. The fact that we're talking about a radical abortion bill. Look, let's smash the smokescreen. This is not reproductive health reform. This is not taking abortion out of the Crimes Act and putting it into a healthcare. No. This is an abortion bill. Let's be upfront and confront.
And let's make
my
another
community
point,
is very upset.
Tanya. I noted, and I went through all that stuff that you went through in the debate, but Peter, it's very interesting. When Tanya proposed the amendment which would have kept sex selection abortions illegal, I'm just looking at the debate now, every person, no matter what side, they condemned sex selection. They said it was abhorrent. No, Tanya, that was appalling. We have grave concern about this, Tanya. And we've got to make sure there'll be no gender selection in New South Wales. And you're thinking, well, hello, this amendment's over the line.
That's what I thought.
Over the line.
Yeah.
Vote. They vote against the amendment.
They vote for a review. The
review was after the fact. So
precisely.
This is, look, I went through IVF for many years. You cannot use sex selection in IVF. So the embryo that you get is the embryo you get, and there it is. But now in New South Wales, I can't choose sex selection in IVF, but I can just wait till I'm pregnant, right up until the due date, decide I don't like the colour that the nursery's painted and abort the child I have under the rules that your Parliament... I know you're on the side of the angels here, but under the laws that your Parliament's going to pass.
That's true.
How is the case?
Exactly. And look, there is evidence now.
Well, look at the figures in Victoria.
There is evidence this is happening now in New South Wales. ABS data looking at the number of boys born versus the number of girls in certain communities, it is skewed in favour of the boys. It is already happening. I moved a motion to make it illegal day one this bill would be assented, and that was voted down for 12 months. Let's actually just see if it's happening for 12 months.
Open slather. So
and
where do you think this is going to go?
Because
the trouble is, it's going to go to the upper house, and there's going to be very heated debate in the upper house of New South Wales. But, unbelievable, I find, the National Party are going to vote with the Labor Party and this rump of the Liberal Party, which does appear, no matter the nature of the debate, the rationality of the argument, do you think it is going to get through the upper house, or will people start to respond to the concerns that we've articulated here?
Well, I hope people respond to the genuine concerns, particularly the outrage in the community, but I also hope the Premier steps up and takes leadership on this issue, stop the divisive nature this bill is becoming in our own party room, actually begin to repair the damage to our brand in our communities. Let's regain basically our standing that we got in the last election, put a pause button on the process and actually put it through a proper committee process public
But you haven't had
consultation.
that. I mean, this
We've
is
had
right.
nothing.
There hasn't been involvement of the community.
No.
The Premier voted against your sex selection amendment. The Premier sat on the side with Labor, and
Premier's
two-thirds
now
of her
in
own
Germany,
people
London.
sat on the other side of a chamber.
Taken
They
off.
looked for a leader. But worse than that, she didn't have the guts to speak to the bill. She has not articulated her position on this. The only statement I've seen is a statement from London this week that says she's always wanted to be on this issue. She's always wanted to change this issue. She did not want to raise it before the election because she thought it would be too contentious.
Well, I mean,
that's outrageous.
I mean, it's a fallacious argument. You've cited this. I mean, the issue that had to be changed, you had to take it out of the Crimes Act and make it a health issue. Well, everyone knows that. That is not what this is about, is it?
Correct, no.
But I just say to viewers at home, you listen to this lady speak. She represents a Western Sydney electorate. And you say to yourself, well, why wouldn't a leader listen to such a rational presentation? Why?
I'm a minister for
There's
women.
something seriously wrong with leadership when a person in your own team can articulate so clearly and so simply, and Tanya's moved to the sidelines. Look, congratulations on the stand you've taken, and we'll keep in touch. We're grateful for you coming in.
Thank you for raising it.
Tanya Davies is her name, a former Minister for Women. She is not a member of the ministry. But then that's another story, isn't it? Factions and all that sort of rubbish.